Thank you. Working together, we will begin the urgent task of rebuilding our nation and renewing the American dream.
November the 9th, 2016, and Donald Trump had just been elected as the new president of the United States. Hillary Clinton, the favorite, had lost.
She congratulated us, it's about us, on our victory.
In Moscow, the election result was also being celebrated.
We are pleased that the best candidate has won. Let Grandma Hillary have a rest.
We were baffled. In the State Duma, nationalist Vladimir Zhirinovsky held a special reception to celebrate Trump's victory.
There were reports of people popping champagne corks at the time. I don't know anyone personally, but I heard about it. Well, a love of grandeur is part of the Russian national character.
Vladimir Putin was one of the first to congratulate the surprise winner, Donald Trump.
Russia wants to completely restore its relationship with the USA.
The fact that Trump was focusing on the slogan, "Make America Great Again," that he wanted to promote his own country rather than pushing for globalization, was good news for us Russians.
President Putin and President Trump shook hands on a new friendship. But the first 2 years of Trump's presidency were overshadowed by the so-called Russian affair. The charge was conspiracy against the United States. Did the two men illegally collude?
I never worked for Russia, and you know that answer better than anybody. I never worked for Russia.
There were signs of male bonding every time the two presidents met. But could a true partnership ever really develop? Could these men really become friends? Or were their states destined to remain enemies?
It's all about Russia, Russia, Russia. Russia didn't help me at all.
Да, я хотел, потому что он говорил о нормализации российско-американских отношений.
Not a question of friend or enemy. He's not my enemy. Buddy, I never worked for Russia.
Back to 2016. In the run-up to the US presidential elections, Russia's state media backed the Republican candidate Donald Trump, a man known for his affinity towards Russia.
We're going to have a great relationship with Putin and Russia.
Political tensions between Russia and the US had been rising, amounting even to talk of a new Cold War.
The politics of U.S. Democrats and President Obama had steered the Russian-American relationship down a blind alley.
The Democrats' new presidential candidate was Putin's arch-enemy, Hillary Clinton.
She even compared him with Hitler, quite blatantly. She said he was just like Hitler, so it was obvious that relations would be difficult if she became president.
Moscow pinned all its hopes on Donald Trump to revive the relationship between the two nations.
Trump expressed himself quite differently. He said he would find a common language with Putin, that it was possible to work together with Putin. And that's exactly what he was planning to do.
Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, two men with two common enemies, Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama. Despite having different reasons, Trump and Putin both shared a feeling of being disparaged by the outgoing US president and the American establishment.
Я думаю, что для Путина, конечно же,
I think that from Putin's perspective, Donald Trump was a better prospect to lead the USA than Hillary Clinton. Putin knew Obama's position and had tried to outperform him several times in world politics, without success.
Putin's mistrust of the US, its president and its allies was deep-rooted. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, Putin had experienced what Western betrayal actually meant: the expansion of NATO into formerly communist Eastern Europe.
First Poland joined, then it was the Czech Republic and Hungary. Then it went on and on and on. Now, the Baltic states, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, are all members of NATO too. They share borders with Russia. On which basis should Putin or anyone else trust a word the West says? I don't know.
Even with President Obama, relations did not improve. Putin was rattled by Obama's advocacy of regime change in the Arab world.
У него все время создавалось ощущение, что
He always had the feeling that things were moving in the wrong direction, that nothing was going the way it should. The key change was the Arab Spring.
The situation in Libya was dramatic, and then Gaddafi, the head of state, was murdered live on camera. That scene must have hit Putin really hard.
But Trump's dislike of Obama, on the other hand, was personal, not political. 2011 was a trial run for Trump. He launched his own unofficial election campaign, aiming to run as the Republican candidate in the 2012 presidential election, challenging Obama.
Let me tell you, he doesn't like Donald Trump, and the last guy in the world that he wants to run against is Donald Trump.
Trump rekindled an old rumor about Obama, claiming that his true birthplace was Kenya and that the president was therefore not eligible for office.
Trump was not, I think, on anybody's radar other than as a bit of a lark, right, in this back and forth. I mean, again, as with so many things about Trump, you don't take it seriously at first because it just seems so outlandish and bizarre.
Obama finally published his birth certificate in April 2011. At the traditional correspondence dinner in Washington, the president hit back.
No one is happier, no one is prouder to put this birth certificate matter to rest than the Donald. And that's because he can finally get back to focusing on the issues that matter. Like, did we fake the moon landing?
A slap in the face that Donald Trump wouldn't quickly forget. His showpiece had backfired. 2 weeks later, he withdrew his presidential candidacy. But Trump declared that he would still win at the next election. Too arrogant to be true? Trump sought his revenge on Obama. And he was not the only one. In Russia, Putin too was waiting for the moment to take revenge on his American counterpart. But first, he had to win an election himself. Yet in the run-up to the elections of March 2012, Moscow became the epicenter of an unprecedented wave of demonstrations against the government.
The protests began after the parliamentary elections in early December 2011, which were hugely rigged. What happened next was what happens elsewhere when citizens realize their votes are not being heard. They go out on the streets.
Putin blamed Hillary Clinton for giving the signal for the protests.
Она в тот момент была
At the same time, she was Secretary of State. The U.S. State Department provided funding for Russian NGOs to observe the elections. To Putin, this was direct interference in his regime. Hillary Clinton wanted to topple him and organize a revolution in Russia.
Putin decided to smash the opposition and accused the US of threatening Russia and its traditional values.
In 2012, I warned my friends from the liberal camp to prepare for the inevitable. They would have to take sides, either us, Russia, or the West.
I thank everyone who has said yes to a strong Russia. I asked you, will we win? Yes.
Putin's tactics paid off. He was the clear winner of the presidential elections, with 64% of the vote.
Putin has shown that his politics are geared towards traditional values: family, loyalty to the people, and service to the fatherland. These values have always been typical of the Russian service class, as it used to be called.
In November 2012, President Obama was also re-elected. His second term began.
We have fought our way back, and we know in our hearts that for the United States of America, the best is yet to come.
Russia, however, was not very high on Obama's agenda.
There's no big economic relationship. There was no big need at the moment for focusing on nuclear weapons or non-proliferation. The treaties weren't coming up right at that point. So for Obama, it was a focus completely on other issues, on the Middle East, on terrorism, on domestic affairs. Russia was really an afterthought.
But one US citizen was vying for Putin's attention: Donald Trump. As early as 2013, he had recognized that Russia was also a land of unlimited opportunities. As the owner of the rights to Miss Universe, Trump had voted to hold the beauty pageant in Moscow. He launched a charm offensive on Twitter. Could Putin be his new best friend? He was certain that Putin would attend the contest. In November 2013, Trump arrives in Moscow, flanked by beauty queens.
Moscow is a city that does glitz really well. And Trump, as we know, is a guy who likes a lot of flash. The more it gleams gold, the more exciting it is to him.
It's an amazing location, and Moscow and all of Russia is going wild over it. So we're very happy. The Miss Universe pageant is just setting records.
Russian billionaire Aras Agalarov was hosting the event. Trump had met him just 5 months previously in Las Vegas. Mikhail Aidov, editor-in-chief of GQ Russia magazine at the time, was approached by Aras Agalarov to write a cover story. He refused.
My compromise was that we're not going to write anything about the, this little horror, but like I will come and like I'll hang out at the opening party for the pageant, and I will get photographed for for the society pages.
In spite of all Agalarov's efforts to persuade Putin to attend the beauty pageant, the Russian president didn't turn up. Trump's trip to Russia later fueled allegations that Moscow had recruited him as an agent, engineered by host Agalarov, a man with close contacts in the Kremlin.
If I knew that this idiotic event would somehow become kind of the crux, the focal point of like the 21st century's biggest conspiracy theory, I would probably pay closer attention or try to hang out with Trump and the Galarovs. But I really doubt, honestly, that this is when the plot was hatched.
During his stay in Moscow, Trump continued his offensive against Obama for Russia.
All over the world, people are laughing at us. They're ripping us off. I mean, you look at what's going on in Russia and Moscow. You look at how it's just booming and how well it does. And they have the Olympics. And as you know, we tried to get the Olympics and came in 4th place. Now figure that one out, 4th place.
Yet Putin ignored his advances.
For the average Russian, Trump was a money magnate, a man with a trophy wife who built towers all over the world. No more than that. He was a businessman, one of many. I don't think Putin perceived him any differently at this point.
But giving up was not an option for Donald Trump. He was determined to find a way to get Putin's attention. But the Russian president had more important plans. He wanted to get his country back on the world stage, fast. And he could see a way to do it. In early 2014, the Ukrainian peninsula of Crimea became the center of the most serious East-West crisis since the end of the Cold War. On the 22nd of February, Viktor Yanukovych, the Moscow-loyal president of Ukraine, was ousted from office. Putin realized he had to take action.
Since he couldn't help President Yanukovych to stay in power, Ukraine had to be punished. He wanted to show that a people's revolution could only worsen a country's situation. It was also a clear warning to his own country.
Putin, whose empire borders on Ukraine, wants to prevent Ukraine moving closer to Europe.
If
this state joined the West and became a member of the EU and NATO, first of all, it meant that NATO troops would be stationed all along this long border. Furthermore, it was obvious that if Crimea belonged to Ukraine, it was no longer Russia's most important naval base. Instead, we could have the American 6th Fleet, for example, coming to Sevastopol.
Putin called a midnight meeting and decided that Crimea should once again belong to Russia.
You know, the Sochi Olympics were still going on, or they had just ended, the world was distracted. And so Russia clearly had plans on the books to take back Crimea. They didn't invent them. It wasn't an impulsive move, if you like.
Moscow acted quickly. Just 3 weeks after the Ukrainian president's overthrow, Crimea declared its independence.
The annexation of the strategic Black Sea Peninsula quickly followed Sunday's hastily called referendum in which its residents overwhelmingly backed breaking from Ukraine and joining Russia.
I would like to congratulate all citizens of Russia, Crimea, and Sevastopol on this significant event.
Sometimes for Americans, I try to explain that it would be as if by an accident of history, the U.S. lost part of South Florida, but not just South Florida, Orlando, Disney. And if by chance the opportunity arose for a president to grab it back, what would people say? That it was a violation of international law, or Disney is ours? And that's what you hear in Russia. The cry goes up, Krim nash, Crimea is ours.
The United States and the European Union reacted by imposing economic sanctions on Russia.
Sanctions have arrived as the new way of conflict between countries because it's perceived as being inexpensive. It's something that's politically satisfying, There's an entire class of new sanctions experts, and they offer their services to the sovereign and the Congress and the president. They're all very interested in having these services.
At the Nuclear Security Summit in The Hague in March 2014, Barack Obama attacked the Russian president again.
Russia is a regional power that is threatening some of its immediate neighbors, not out of strength, but out of weakness.
Obama's derision only served to encourage Putin to advance further into Ukraine. Tensions rose in April as fighting erupted between pro-Russian and pro-government forces in the East Ukrainian Donbass region.
Putin has said it so many times. Russia and Ukraine are one nation. They belong together. One people, one empire, one leader.
Russian policy on Ukraine is viewed as very fundamental to Russian national identity. I mean, you hear Russians, officials, media, ordinary people talking all the time about my Ukrainian grandmother, my summers in Ukraine, Ukraine is my left arm, my right arm, whatever, right? It's a deep feeling of closeness to Ukraine.
As if he also understood what Ukraine meant to Russia, Donald Trump chipped in.
Putin, Russia is like, I mean, they're really hot stuff. And now you have people in the Ukraine, who knows, set up or not, but it can't all be set up. But Russia, I mean, what he's done for Russia is really amazing.
Trump's praise for Putin fell on deaf ears.
Before Trump ran for the presidency, no one saw him as particularly influential, let alone as a person to watch out for politically.
As a penalty for the ongoing fighting in Ukraine, the US and Europe imposed new sanctions on the Russian finance, energy, and defense sectors in September 2014. Putin retaliated. For him, the US was the real troublemaker.
You might think the United States' special position and leadership was really a blessing for us all. Well, let me tell you, this was not the case. Instead of solving conflicts, it led to their escalation and the spread of chaos. Instead of democracy, support for dubious groups was growing, from neo-fascists to radical Islamists.
Provocation from Moscow was nothing new for the West.
After annexing the Crimea and the events in East Ukraine, Russia was in total diplomatic isolation. Putin was virtually ignored at the G20 meeting in Australia. He left it early.
Putin needed a new front to demonstrate Russian strength. He found it in Syria.
Russia's always had strong relations with the Syrian government. It sold weapons to the Syrian government over many years, often on credit, and after a while that credit would magically be forgiven.
The civil war in Syria had been raging for 5 years. In its fight against the insurgents, President Bashar al-Assad's army had laid waste to entire cities. Amid the chaos, the so-called Islamic State had seized control of great swathes of eastern Syria. Putin did not want to see another Arab dictator toppled. He decided to intervene.
With Bashar al-Assad, it wasn't about supporting him personally. The problem was keeping the Syrian state going. What has U.S. and European intervention in other states' internal affairs ever achieved? With this excuse of teaching you about democracy and your way of life. Only chaos and collapse. This applies to Afghanistan, Iraq, and Libya. And now, in Syria, Russia was saying, stop, that's enough.
On the 30th of September 2015, Russia launched its airstrikes. Officially, they were targeting Islamic terror militia. Putin's American champion gave it his full backing. On American television, Trump endorsed Putin's intervention in Syria and said no one should get in Russia's way against the Islamic State. Yet Trump was alone with his message of support. The US and its allies demanded that the Russian airstrikes stop. Their missiles were also hitting innocent people.
We're Russians. We wage war. And when we wage war, we want to win. And we do win. Even if only 15 or 20% of our bombs hit their target, they still hit their target.
Russian military support changed the situation in Syria dramatically, in favor of the Assad regime. The international community could no longer ignore Putin.
He needed a breakthrough, an opportunity to return to the world stage. He wanted to regain his place at the table with the other players. Russian intervention in Syria was his ticket.
They went in there, they started the bombing campaign, and they really forced the US to talk to them. And ever since then, you know, the Russian and American militaries have been engaged in deconfliction talks on a daily basis.
At the same time, Donald Trump was eyeing the US presidency once again. He had already launched his election campaign in June 2015.
I am officially running for President of the United States, and we are going to make our country great again.
At this time, Trump was already leading the race for the Republican candidacy. People were starting to take him seriously. So, of course, they also started following his comments about Russia.
Trump's attempts to curry favor with the Russian president finally paid off. In December 2015, Putin mentioned Donald Trump in public for the first time.
He's a very striking and no doubt very talented man. He appears to be the great favorite in the presidential contest.
Trump was happy to accept the praise.
He came out of nowhere 2 days ago, and he said, Trump is brilliant. He's great. He's the leader. He's the leader of the parties. And he said nice things. I didn't know. I never met him, so I didn't know. And he said nice things. All of a sudden, I'm hearing things like, oh, isn't it terrible that Putin is saying that? That's not terrible. That's good. That's like a good thing, not a bad thing. He can't stand Obama. Obama can't stand him. They're always fighting. Wouldn't it be nice if we could get along like with people? You know?
So I guess what begins in late 2015 is this sort of mutual flirtation, if not a love affair, with Trump having praised Putin and Putin now seeing the possibility that Trump could play in this election and praising Trump as somebody who could be presidential.
There's something I find important and can only approve of. I see nothing wrong with it. On the contrary, Mr. Trump said he would be willing to restore Russian-American relations. What's bad about that? We all want that, don't you?
From the Russian perspective, it was clear whom to support in the election. Putin spoke favorably, but also quite carefully about Trump. He said it was good, but didn't say he thought Trump was great or anything like that. He was much more reserved.
On the 22nd of July 2015, Trump became the official Republican presidential candidate.
I am asking for your support tonight so that I can be your champion in the White House. And I will be your champion. Nobody knows the system better than me, which is why I alone can fix it.
Trump presented himself as Putin's Western kindred spirit.
Due to his character and his upbringing, he didn't just like Putin as a politician, but also as a person with a personality similar to his own, with strength, trust, consistency, and enormous resilience. Just like Trump himself.
A few days later, Trump appeared before the press. The question came up again. Would he recognize Crimea as Russian territory when he became president? Or lift the sanctions?
We'll be looking at that, yeah, we'll be looking. Go ahead.
His comments contradicted both US government and NATO policy. Both wanted to keep sanctions in place until Russia returned Crimea to Ukraine. But Trump saw NATO chiefly as a competitor to the US.
Donald Trump begins to cast enormous skepticism and doubt on the NATO alliance. But his point being that NATO, like everything else he's ever done, should be transactional. How much the United States is paying versus how much other allies are contributing should be the determinative factor rather than the idea of collective security that has been the bedrock of the alliance since its founding.
Trump is an isolationist. He says NATO is sucking away American resources. He believes this, yet he understands nothing about foreign policy, nor does he wish to.
And I'm sure that from Vladimir Putin's point of view, this is music to his ears.
In July 2016, Hillary Clinton made US history as the first female presidential candidate of a major party.
And so, my friends, it is with humility, determination, and boundless confidence in America's promise that I accept your nomination.
In the same month, she accused Russia of interfering in the presidential elections. Russian hackers were alleged to have stolen and published emails from the Democratic National Committee. Their aim was to sow seeds of discord in her party to benefit Donald Trump.
In 2016, Putin set out to create chaos in the United States, mostly so he could say to the Russians at home, look at this. This democracy is a complete mess.
Trump was very enthusiastic. He encouraged the hackers to find even more emails.
If Russia or China or any other country has those emails, I mean, to be honest with you, I'd love to see them. Russia, if you're listening, I hope you're able to find the 30,000 emails that are missing.
Putin denied all the accusations and said Russia had not interfered with the US elections and that the scandal surrounding the alleged stolen emails was fake.
The most important thing was the content, which the public now knows about. That's the only thing that matters, not who stole it.
I always say to Americans, do you actually realize that we totally control the US? Our hackers control everything. But of course, that's utter nonsense. From my point of view, the most stupid thing is they use this excuse to oppose Trump's domestic policies.
On November the 9th, 2016, something that very few people had thought possible happened. Hillary Clinton lost the presidential election.
This is not the outcome we wanted or we worked so hard for,
And I'm sorry that we did not win this election for the values we share and the vision we hold for our country.
A historic election night was over. The winner was Donald Trump.
I pledge to every citizen of our land that I will be president for all Americans, and this is so important to me.
There was applause from Moscow, too.
So this is not only the victory for the Americans who defended their democracy against the liberal globalist elites. No, this is the victory that American people brought to the whole world.
The reality is a great number of Russians felt vindicated. They felt that something right had happened. Now justice will be done and Russia's grievances will be respected by a new American president.
We are the champions of the world!
At the end of the day, Trump stands for protectionism in the economy and for greater U.S. sovereignty. He doesn't want any migrants in the country, for instance. His way of thinking was much closer to Putin's.
So was the outgoing President Barack Obama now history? Not quite. He still had one card to play. In December, his government expelled 35 Russian citizens in retaliation for Moscow's alleged interferences in the elections. But there was no reaction from Putin, yet.
We only react when we can benefit. Obama's presidency was more or less over. Why should we have wasted our political capital? Even in 2014 or 2015, he could no longer do a lot.
Putin signaled that Moscow was waiting for the arrival of President Trump in the White House and would solve the problems with him.
Putin didn't want to start the relationship with President Trump off on this sour note and instead sent Trump this positive message. Trump responded and said Vladimir Putin was very smart in not retaliating.
Putin even defended the newly elected president, even giving a surprising answer to questions about rumors that Russia had compromising material on Trump, including images with prostitutes during his visit to Moscow in 2013.
I can hardly imagine that he went into a hotel to meet girls with low sense of social responsibility. Even if they are, of course, the best in the world. People who fake pictures of the kind now circulating of the elected US president to use them in a political battle are worse than prostitutes. They have absolutely no moral standards.
On January the 20th, 2017, Donald Trump was sworn in as the 45th President of the United States of America.
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States.
The office of President of the United States.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations, Mr. President.
Would the relationship with Moscow now be rebooted?
Putin was entertaining the hope that he could create a different kind of relationship with the USA to the previous one, which meant gradually rebuilding the world to fit his own rules and turning Russia back into a superpower. He and Trump would make a deal on how the rest of the world would live.
But Moscow's hopes of a fresh beginning with Washington were soon dashed. First of all, by Nikki Haley, Trump's new ambassador to the United Nations. Haley's first appearance in February 2017 marked a tougher stance.
I consider it unfortunate
that the occasion of my first appearance here is one in which I must condemn the aggressive actions of Russia. The dire situation in eastern Ukraine is one that demands clear and strong condemnation of Russian actions.
Contrary to all of Trump's previous comments, Ambassador Haley confirmed that US sanctions would remain in place until Russia withdrew from Crimea. The US government's anti-Russian tack continued. In March, FBI Director James Comey confirmed that his agency would conduct an official investigation into the Russian government's alleged interference in the 2016 US election campaign.
And that includes investigating the nature of any links between individuals associated with the Trump campaign and the Russian government, and whether there was any coordination between the campaign and Russia's efforts.
In April, UN Ambassador Haley once again condemned Russia's complicity with the Syrian Assad regime, this time citing a poison gas attack.
Yesterday morning, we awoke to pictures, to children foaming at the mouth, suffering convulsions, being carried in the arms of desperate parents. The truth is that Assad, Russia, and Iran have no interest in peace. When the United Nations consistently fails in its duty to act collectively, there are times in the life of states that we are compelled to take our own action.
Three days later, US missiles hit the Syrian military airport, where the poison gas attack was allegedly carried out.